This is my newest design for a hidden blade, my pirate blade as I call it. Works just like my other gravity blade. You activate the lock, blade will pop out, hold in place, point up, and it'll close back down. The difference with this one is if you reach back here and slide a little hidden switch, it becomes a lot longer. So you have an option on the fly to go ahead and just switch up blade lengths. So if you're a purist and you only want a one-tiered blade, or if you're like me and you like the long, thin aspect ratio of the traditional hidden blade, you get both options in this kit. So just like my default offerings, you can head over to Etsy and pick up one like you're seeing right now, or you can head over to Shapeways and get a kit, which I'll show you how to make. So these are the pieces that you receive with your Shapeways kit. You'll have a main body, a first tier, and a second tier. You'll have a little back plug, you'll have the main lock, and then you'll have the two blade locks. They actually come connected. You just clip off the little connection rod and clear off the vestige, and you have all your parts right here. Now, if you receive your kit and you don't have all of these parts, go ahead and follow the link in the description and you can get Shapeways to fix that for you. Now, the assembly of this kit is remarkably similar to many of my other kits, so I'm going to do a quick fast forward. At this point, I've done a couple things. First and foremost, I've cleared out all the pieces, just like I've shown in previous videos, where I do the toothbrush and I test assemble everything to get all the extra dust out. The next thing I've done is I've cleared out all the holes using my old paper clip inside of a Dremel or a drill trick, and I'll show you where those are all now. Hopefully you can see very easily with this version. You can see there's two holes here that go through both the main body and the end plug. You just go ahead and clear those guys out so you can put pins through here. You also, back here on the main top block, the main lock here, you have a set of holes both in the main body and in the lock itself that go straight through, so you clear those guys out. You have another hole that goes through the tip of your main lock. That's what your little piece of fishing line will go through. And then you also have these two holes here, which also go through the side locks and the first tier. So if you clear out these, those, and those, you'll have all the holes you need cleared out. And the last step that I've done is went ahead and I sanded everything down using 220 grit sandpaper just to take a little bit of the texture off that's natural in the SLS nylon parts and to smooth everything out to get us some room when we go to do our finishing. So all you have to do now is disassemble everything and we can go on to finishing. Okay, so now we're going to start finishing. Just a reminder, I always recommend you do a full assembly before you do any finishing, then disassemble, do your finishing, and then put it back together. But in this case, I'm just going to go straight on to finishing. So this is what we have, and this is what we're aiming to get. This is my original prototype. And so you see, first thing we need to do is get some foil tape on this. Now I cover this in pretty good detail in my Romano blade video, so just take a piece of foil tape and stick it down where you need it. You can see I got the foil tape on, and you can see I've even continued it all the way down and around these elements. And the reason why is because in the next step, depending on what you do, it may be difficult to get your chosen item down onto these surfaces, so using this conforming aluminum tape will make that look nice and shiny and different. Now, you have a few options. Now, in my original prototype, you can see here, I'm using brass tape. And the kind you can get at your average craft store or online is meant for stained glass, and so it's thin pieces. And so if you look closely, you can see that there's joints here, here, and here, and down on the blade here and here. And that's because I put one strip there, and then I just trim out the middle. However, that's an option, but just a warning that brass tape is much stiffer than aluminum tape, and so it will not form around edges, which is why I have that silver you can see there on the edge. But it is definitely workable. Now what I've done, because I'm weird and I do stuff like this, is I bought a big old roll from McMaster-Carr of brass sheeting, just normal metal, and then I took that with some double stick tape and I've created big old chunks, wide chunks of brass foil tape so I can do these larger areas without having to do seams. Now the other option you have, which I think might look fantastic, like you see here, is you can go ahead and use copper tape. You can get this in thicker sections and it will give you that nice two-tone effect and you won't have to fight with the stiffness of brass. Now if you want to forego the whole foil tape aspect, you can obviously use gold rub-and buffs, you can use gold paint. Just make sure you mask everything off on all of these parts when you're doing those sections. But just a note that this section and this section are bearing surfaces, so things are going to be scraping back and forth on those as you operate the device. So you don't want to use anything super thin like gold foils without protecting them and making sure that they're not going to scratch back off, but also not being too thick because you might gum up the works. So those are your options. I'm going to be using my brass foil, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on all of these raised sections here. With everything covered in your particular alternate color of choice, the next step is to go ahead and give everything a wash with slightly watered down black matte acrylic paint, and that will give you your base coat. Alright, and you can see everybody has a nice coat of black all over them. So the next step is to take a little bit of clear coat and then basically mist these parts with maybe 1 or 2 coats of it. You don't want a thick coat because you'll gum stuff up. You're actually looking for a little bit of texture, and that texture is what we're going to use in the next step. So give all your main body parts a good light coat of some clear coat. Okay, so these parts have been clear coated. Hopefully you can see maybe a little bit the shiny but still kind of texturedness of these parts. So once the clear coat is dried, what you need to do is get yourself some, I use some silver rub and buff. You can, I guess, use some paint, and with a teeny tiny little amount of it, just a tiny little bit, what you need to do is go and then kind of mark up the edges. So let's start with this main part here, and just using the little bit of rub and buff that's on my hands, I'm going to kind of lightly go over any of these kind of edges that would be kind of proud sticking out of the top, and then get a little bit even on the flat surfaces, and just continue this process for all of your pieces to kind of give it that dirty silver grungy look. With everything buffed and ready to go, you can start your final assembly. Go ahead and put your blade, your first tier into your second tier, and then drop those into the main body. Make sure that this hole and this little tab are on the bottom. So the next step is to install your side locks. I've shown this off in my Romano blade video. You do this, there's 2 different ways you can do this. Remember that this little notch and these 2 little cutouts need to go on the outside, and that this long piece needs to point towards the bottom. Go ahead and drop that in, and then install your locks using the light 1/4 inch rubber bands, the way I've shown in my Romano blade video. With your side locks installed and springy and doing their job, you can see, you can go ahead and move on to the back end of here. So what you need to do is bend a piece of paper clip at a 90-degree angle and jam it in there, and then bend another little foot off of it so it falls into this little channel here. It may take you a little bit of adjusting, but you got to get that right in that little slot. And then what you need to do, if you look, hopefully, so on the inside you can see that there's that little tooth that sticks up, but when I slide it all the way over, you can see it's now flush with that inner surface. So that's how you can size that. So you can see it's flush with that inner surface, and then whoop, it sticks right back out. So that's what you need to do to cut that correctly. So then all you need to do is go ahead and take this inner foot here, clip that off at some kind of reasonable distance, and then with this lined up straight, go ahead and just bend this piece back like so. So it bends around the plastic, and then clip it off so that there's a little kind of shorter foot on it, like so, and then just take your pair of pliers and moosh it down like so, so it's now flat. And that also gives you some nice tension that makes this very difficult to slide out of position. Now you can take your bottom piece, and you can see these little channels that were cut in here. We'll slide over that little piece of paper clip, still allowing this to move, and then go ahead and put your 2 pins all the way through this back guy and cut them off flush. So there's your back plate in. You can see you have this little paper clip back here, which you can now move back and forth. and you should test to make sure that when it's in this side position, that this piece can still slide and won't get caught up on it. If it gets caught up on something, you need to trim the length of this little foot down here a little bit shorter. And then you can also test it by sliding it up with everything closed in. Slide this up, and then you should find that only the first tier wants to fall out. The second tier is locked behind that little foot. And then obviously if you slide this guy back, it frees up this first tier. And there you go. So, last thing is the front lock. This is a little bit different than my other front locks, but the principle is pretty much the same. Go ahead and pin that one in. Make sure that you pin it in the correct direction. You want the angle of this to go this way, not opposite. Now, for putting rubber bands on this one, you have two options. You can use these smaller ones, but I would recommend you go ahead and get the heavy, the 6-ounce variety. Now, the difference between these and these, this is a 2.5 ounce rubber band. This is a 6-ounce. So you can do it with these small ones, but you're gonna need a lot of them. So whichever rubber bands you use, the process is pretty much the same. Go ahead and take one of your rubber bands, press it through here, punk it through, and then you should see you can hook it over this little front hook and pull that back. Then using a highly engineered grabbing tool, go ahead and reach through here so you can grab and pull the rubber band through to the bottom, and then just stretch this guy over and hook it down. Now, using these 6-ounce rubber bands, I found that if you do that 4 times with, so you have 4 bands on here, you get a good amount of force that will keep this guy closed so that this doesn't pop out if you're running around or shaking your arms around. Now, since these are 6-ounce rubber bands, if you compare that to the thinner, smaller ones, the 2.5-ounce ones, you're going to need to do that about 9 or 10 times. So just to save my sanity in case these things break or wear out and need to be replaced, I went ahead and got the thicker ones. But if you'd like to save some money, you can do a bunch of the little ones. I'm not going to stop you. And with that, I now have 4 rubber bands holding this guy on super hard. And then all you gotta do is take a piece of string, or I like using fishing line, tie a big old knot in the end of it, aim it right towards that inner hole, and pull it all the way through, and that's what you'll use to activate and deactivate the device. One of the last steps you can do after you've done your rub and buff is go ahead and get a little bit more of your black paint, and I go back and I retouch up this tip just to black out the safety bits of it. If you'd like to add some of these kind of, you can see scratches and marks, an easy way to do that is to simply take a little bit of silver acrylic paint, go ahead and get yourself a nice little blob of that on something. And then you can use just a butter knife, and if you just carefully dip just the edge of the butter knife in the paint and just kind of cut the paint with it, then what you can do is just simply basically press this down like a potato stamp to create a slice. Now if you want finer edged slices, you can take something a little bit more fine edge, like in this case a little razor blade, do the same thing. And then you don't want too much paint on it, just a tiny little bit, and then what you can do is just kind of slice at it like so, and you can see it gives you little lines. I've used this on foam armor, I've used this in a lot of different places, and then all you gotta do is just keep slicing at it, and every so often you might need to add a little bit more paint back on the guy. As I've described in my other videos, in order for this lock system to work, you need a little bit of a spacer, usually a piece of foam down here, to give yourself a little bit of room so that this can work comfortably and doesn't dig into your wrist. So for this blade, what you can do is you can either cut yourself out a piece of foam to match what it has in the game, or you can do what I did. I just unscrewed this from my McFarlane Prop, and I just cut a teeny tiny little extra bit of the rubber out here so that this guy can sit in there. And then all you need to do is double stick tape or glue this guy here in the middle, so that way you can still get to here if you need to mess with the rubber bands, and you can still obviously get back here so you can access your switch. And so that way you have your nice completed blade. as typical with my kits, the last step is to strap it to your arm. You can use whatever you have lying around. I'm using some straps I got from some shin guards. Strap it to the side of your arm. Go ahead and leave yourself enough space so you can move your arm around comfortably. And then tie your piece of fishing line off to a ring. I like leaving myself enough room so I can fully move my arm around and then just reach up here and grab the extra loop to extend and contract it. And then remember that in order to switch the mode, all you got to do is just reach a little bit back here, find that paper clip, slide it, in this case, up if it's on your left arm, and boom, you have a single tiered blade, and then you can go ahead and slide it down, and you'll have a double tiered blade for extra distance. And so just like that, you are good to go.